Welcome to A Road Less Traveled podcast. I am Hilary, I'm your host, and today we have with us Lyndsie Russell. Lyndsie, please give us your official title and your background.
Okay, so my official title is partner at Miles, Sears, and Yanni.
And your background?
Oh gosh, okay, so my background, I went to Fresno State. I have a degree in political science, a degree in criminology, both bachelor's degree. From there, I went to law school. I graduated in 2015 with my law degree from USC. And since then, I've worked at Miles, Sears, and Yanni, which we're a small plaintiffs firm in town. We focus on personal injury.
Amazing. And you're very, very involved in the community?
I am. That's how we met. So we met in Pink. So I'm now an alumni member of Pink. I'm on the board of directors for Resiliency Center. What else? I'm a professor at Fresno City College. I teach legal writing to paralegals.
Nice.
Yeah.
I might have to come take that class just to,
You're more than welcome.
Fix my writing a little bit.
Tonight's a pizza party. You're missing out.
Yes. Amazing. And you serve some of the legal organizations in town?
I do. So I'm the past president of the Fresno County Young Lawyers Organization. I did that or at least was a member of the board for about 5 years. I'm now on the Fresno County Bar Association on the board of directors. I'm on the planning committee for the Civil Advocacy Institute, which helped teach young lawyers really how to handle a case from the very beginning, from client intake all the way through. We cover appeals. What else? I feel like I'm missing something.
You've done some mock trial?
Oh, I've definitely done mock trial. Also, incoming president of the Central Valley Trial Lawyers Association. I've coached mock trial at the high school and college level.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
So this is actually kind of leads me directly into what we're going to talk about, which is you are very heavily involved, which leads you to mentorship opportunities, I presume.
It does.
Are you seeing more women coming into legal field or at least exploring the legal field?
I would say so. It's starting to get a little bit more encouraging with women. The statistics are still a little scary once you start looking at how many women are in the partnership role, particularly in an equity partnership. In law, it's a little weird. We have equity and non-equity, where the non-equity is kind of just in name only. But the equity partnership levels they're improving, but it's not an accurate representation of women in the legal field. But at least at the law school level and, pre-law in college or in mock trial, we are starting to see an increase where it is, I think women are now bypassing the amount of men in law school by a tiny bit.
That's amazing.
It is.
Is it helpful for them to see and interact with you just to kind of get to know, like, hey, there's a bad bitch and she can do this and I can do this too?
I think so. I think it was helpful for me. So I have 3 male partners at my firm, and like one of them said, I can tell you how to do a trial and I can give you advice, but I can never tell you what it's like to be a woman in a courtroom. And
that's amazing to have somebody acknowledge that.
Oh, they're amazing.
I feel like oftentimes that goes without any acknowledgement. So that's really good on that. Good on you.
Oh, yeah. I had an issue where an older male attorney literally argued where my head partner practiced.
Okay.
Like it took me at least 3 or 4 times to convince him that my head partner had been in the same office we've been in the same location for 50 years. And he's like, no, he doesn't practice in Fresno.
You're like, okay.
And I was like, I think I know where he works. Been in the office quite a while now. And so one of the partners, he goes, it's because you're young and you're female, right? And I said, oh, no, I do. I totally do.
That's so encouraging.
It is.
Do you have days where that gets to you really bad, where you're like, F this, F that, I'm going home?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Especially when litigation's already hard because sometimes, depending on the attorney you have on the other side, it's usually not our local attorneys. Our Fresno legal community is so small that everybody knows each other. And so generally we know there's a good chance we're going to see each other, at events or out in public. And so everybody's pretty good with each other in town. Not everybody, but most. Out of town attorneys, a little different.
What are some of the things that they have done that have
So when I was a really young attorney, it was one of my first cases that I worked on. And I would say I was probably less than a year. And it was the head partner's case. But I was doing a lot of the depositions or discovery. And part of it is if you have a dispute, you have to do what we call meet and confer, right? You have to try to work it out, not just yell at each other on the phone. Ideally, you're trying to work it out. You're trying to, you send your email explaining what the problem is. You have to have a phone call or meet in person so that we're not just running to court. So I had one attorney who he was rude to everybody, but particularly me. And he could not have a conversation with me without yelling at me. And so it really came to a head in my client's deposition. It was the wife's deposition, and her husband had been injured in an incident. And he was going into a line of questioning that I didn't think was relevant. It wasn't really proper. It was about her workers' comp history that had nothing to do with the case. So I offered, let me just put a standing objection, which means I don't have to object after every single one of your questions. Let you you can ask your questions. I'm not going to interfere. And he told me no.
Is that even a thing that somebody can do?
No. And so I said, okay, fine. I'll just object after every question, which is a lot more annoying. And so he would ask a question. I would say same objection, tell my client to answer. She'd answer. And we just kept doing this. And probably on the 10th time, he just went off and started yelling. It's videotaped, by the way.
Oh, I can't wait to see that.
It's videotaped, and there is a transcript. So he just starts yelling. He's like, you can't do this. I came from LA, which he mentioned in every single deposition. I came from Irvine. You're interfering. I'm calling the judge. I'm doing this, da, da, da. So I yelled back. And I told him, you're not stopping me. I'm going to put an objection on the record. And we're just going to do a standing objection. I'm not interfering. Here you go. And he finally calmed down after that. And we proceeded with the rest of the deposition. Well, then later in the case, there were also other issues. He was kind of starting to play games. And so we were trying to kick out all of his experts. Just a little bit of a problem for him, right? And so he ended up, we were trying to meet and confer, and I would have to bring in one of the older male attorneys at our firm who was not involved in the case at all, other than he had sat through some depositions because I was still really new. So he would sit and kind of just sit in the back, and then on breaks, we'd talk and he'd give me pointers. I had to bring him in to have any conversation with this guy. So if we're meeting and conferring, he could have a complete, normal tone. He's talking to our older attorney. If I would pipe up anything, his voice would immediately raise. He'd start yelling.
That is unbelievable. And
okay.
So then how do you navigate that? And it's great that your partners are willing to come in and kind of mitigate that, but have you run into that even after that case? Does that continue, or is it lessening?
Sometimes. I had an attorney recently tell me that I should take some time and figure out what I want and then get back to him.
Like in life or in the case?
In the case.
Oh, okay.
In the case. And he just ignored a motion that I filed and then was really confused when the court granted my motion. I was like, you didn't oppose it.
Sorry, you weren't paying attention.
And so then the court ordered him to turn over records he didn't want to turn over. So I told him he should take some time and figure out what he was going to do and get back to me.
I love it.
A little more sassy now than in the beginning.
But you have a great demeanor for that, and you seem, well, in my interactions with you over time, you're very patient.
I try to be.
How do you keep that patience?
It's hard. It's a lot of taking time, walking away, going and complaining to my secretary. Throwing on some music. Sometimes I don't. I've had one time where opposing counsel during trial, he was supposed to send stuff that night. And during trial, you're working late, right? You only have after hours to get stuff filed. And he purposely left me off an email.
Oh.
And I was like, I've been on this case since day one. I've been here every day at trial. You know our head partner doesn't have a computer. He's certainly not checking his email at 11 o'clock at night. And so I had checked it all night, kind of had a draft. And in the morning, we discovered he had purposely left me off. He put the other attorney's secretary on the email, but left me off. And so that I called him out to the judge, but I was literally shaking. I was so pissed.
That was my next question. Does the court, the judge, or even is there recourse within the system to address things like that?
There can be. In Fresno County, we have quite a few female judges, and we were in front of a female judge. And
helpful.
Yes. And so she said, it's no problem that you don't have the full briefing done because we got it at 7:30 in the morning and we had to be there at 8:30. So we tried to get stuff filed as much as we could, but it's like you didn't send it, I checked my email all night. I checked it at 2:30 in the morning.
Does that end up kind of like a bad mark? Is that like a scarlet letter on someone? Or if they're coming from out of the area, do they even care?
I don't know if out of the area cares. I think that's the problem, because they figure they're never going to be, around us again. They might not ever have a case with us or in front of that judge. They don't realize that if they are coming to Fresno, we only have 5 civil judges, and our judges talk.
Yeah.
And so if you do something super horrendous or you're doing something that calls your credibility into question, the judges are going to know.
And it makes its way like wildfire,
yes.
I presume.
Oh, yes. They'll tell you. They're going to talk. They know what goes on.
Are there organizations that are focused on female attorneys locally?
Yes.
Or, I'm sure there is like statewide, nationally. Do we have local associations or groups that?
We have the Fresno County Women Lawyers.
Are you involved in that?
A little bit. I'm a member, but I haven't been on their board or anything like that. But they do, they are a local organization. And then the same, we have them. Most big organizations have some sort of branch for a women's group or really diversity groups. It's starting to become a lot more inclusive.
That's really good to hear.
It is.
When you are in a courtroom and you come up against another female attorney, are you like, yes? Or are you like, oh no?
It doesn't happen that much.
Really?
So for trials, we've had, the last trial I did, there was a female associate. I don't really know what she did other than keep the document. She never did a witness. She really just, she was there, which is good, which is a good step for the firm to bring her. But I have only had one female opposing counsel.
Really?
And I think probably out of all the trials our firm has had since we started, there's been 2.
That is an alarming statistic. So are more women in the legal arena staying out of litigation?
I think part of the problem is a lot of women enter and they will start in litigation. It's a little more common to have them at, say, the motion practice than, say, making it to trial. The problem is when somewhere between when the women enter as associates and when they end up reaching the age for partnership, they are either not becoming equity partners or they are leaving or they're going in-house or they're doing something. We still have quite a few women that are trial attorneys in town, just not really in the area that we do.
One of the common themes that everybody that I've talked to recently keeps identifying is that women question themselves. We do this whole, I'm not qualified, I'm not old enough, I'm not, I don't know, pretty enough, brave enough, experienced enough, whatever it is. How do you combat that? Do you just, do you put those thoughts in a box?
It's hard. So, they call it the practice of law for a reason. And so I think there's always that imposter syndrome and there's always that kind of doubting yourself. And it took 7 years to really start, probably about 6, to really start feeling comfortable enough of, okay, I know what I'm doing. It doesn't mean I still, go to advice to my partners, but really getting over that fear because the law school doesn't really prep you. So you have that issue, which is, I think everybody has, or if not, there's a problem. If you think you know how to be an attorney on day one, that's a problem. That's how you're going to get yourself in trouble.
It's like doing taxes. Real school doesn't prepare you for it, but you have to do it on day one.
Right. So, you got to figure it out, but you have to at least be like cautious and double checking yourself. And that's a lot of the practice of law. But really I don't know, you kind of have to get over it. You have to figure it out. Yep.
I imagine just showing up earns you a little bit of respect, like in and of itself.
It does. There's definitely days where it's absolutely terrifying. My boss had me argue at the Court of Appeal as a 6-month attorney.
That says something, though, like, what a traditional attorney looks like, right? Like an older white man has the confidence and faith in you that you can do this. Did that support propel you?
Oh, definitely. I know he wouldn't. He's not going to throw me in if he doesn't think that I can handle it. But it's kind of like oh crap, we got to figure this out. So you have to figure it out, and you have to figure it out for your client.
I think there's a misconception amongst the general public that all attorneys are stuffy and lame. And until I got to know you a little bit better.
That's what I've heard.
I was like, heck no, Lyndsie is colorful and she's sparkly and she's bright and she's personable. And, I come from a family where my aunt and my uncle on my dad's side, or on my mom's side, are attorneys.
Right.
My aunt on my dad's side is a paralegal. And my uncle on my dad's side is an attorney. And I'm not saying that they are stuffy, but they are from a more traditional, or what they would consider traditional era. And I love the sparkle and the bright that you kind of bring to the arena. I think that's inspiring to bring other women along who are like, oh, I can do this and do that too.
Right.
Did you have any mentors that were sparkly and bright, or is that all you?
I've always loved sparkle. That's a problem. And I think for a while I tried to hide it, right? I still, to a certain extent, like, I'm not going to go in with all glitter nails into trial. That might be a little much. I will do soft hints of glitter that you can't really see from the jury box. I will have my glitter, but it's toned down. And so I think it's kind of figuring out, like, the first couple trials, I wouldn't really do my necklaces. I would try to dress really conservative, right? It's like nude nails. And then I finally realized and heard enough women say, you have to be yourself. And even the guys will say that, right? You have to be yourself. If you're trying to emulate somebody else, the jury's going to realize that you're fake, right? You're putting on a show. And so I'm not obviously going to wear my sparkle jacket to court, but I will certainly wear some. And it makes you more confident. And
so that, like, authenticity,
right,
that comes across, right, to not just to your peers, but to the judge, to the jury.
Yes. And
have you found any issues with clients that are like, you're a woman, you're sparkly, you're bright?
No. I think the weirdest thing is when the client is like, oh, good job, honey. Like, I'm like, okay, you're really sweet, but you're also old enough to be my mom. And so some of them, I've never had a problem. They have never questioned it. They have never had issues. I have not ran into that. But it's a little weird when they're like, oh, we watched you grow up. I'm supposed to be your attorney. Okay. So they never doubted it.
I am. Do we have to talk about it?
Right. Exactly. So I had one like that. But no, most of our clients, I've never had any sort of issue like that.
That's really good to hear.
Yeah.
So I come from the car business, and it's not always like that. Sometimes it's like,
right.
well, you're a girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I can, like, read and write also.
Right.
It's wild.
Right.
Like, we can vote now too.
I drive a car too. We can do that. Yeah.
What do you have any specific mentors that have propped you up, or that you can still turn to? Are there any women? I mean, I know there are men, but are there any women that have?
There's definitely a lot of attorneys in town, specifically female attorneys, that I know that I could call if I had any sort of issue. a lot of my support group are more peers. And so I have a really strong group of female attorneys that I know if I have an issue or just need to vent, they're there.
So peer mentorship is played a big role.
Yes, a very big role.
I feel like sometimes when I have engaged with other people in my industry, they're like, you just fake it till you make it, or just be one of the boys. I'm like, that's just not how we want to function.
Right.
So maybe peer mentorship is something that we can draw more attention to for other women.
I think so. I think it's helpful, especially when they're in the courtroom too. They're experiencing the same rudeness, the same little comments, or they're still seeing the same treatment that they're getting as young women.
How do juries react? Do they have more questions? Do they question you more? Or I don't know if you would, you've only lived in your body, so I don't know if you would be able to discern that, but do you feel like juries react to you being a woman differently than they react to male attorneys?
I don't think so. At least not that I've noticed. No.
That's good.
I'm sure there are some,
Yeah.
right? And there's obviously those jurors who we start out and they're like, I hate ambulance chasers. My partner's like, oh, so you mean us?
Yeah. Nice.
But we're like, great, we're off to a great start. But that's going to happen, right? Everybody has their different views.
And somebody has to advocate for those people.
Exactly. So we don't ambulance chase. So there's a difference.
It seems kind of dangerous. So I'm glad that you don't get out there and run them down.
Exactly.
What do you think what would attract women to your industry? What would get them on that road a little bit less traveled?
I think it's hard. I think there are going to have to be changes because I think a lot of the struggle is once women have their families, that's where the struggle starts. Because law firms can be so demanding. And it's something I struggle with. Of if we had kids, we don't have kids, but if we did, what happens when I'm in trial? And I'm working, I'm leaving for work a couple hours earlier than normal. On day to day, we could figure it out. But, during those periods of time, there's days I'm not home until midnight. Or I'm coming home at 9:00 at night and then immediately just changing into pajamas and then starting to work for another 3 or 4 hours. Who takes care of the kids? Or if that's happening frequently enough or the travel involved, that I think is the struggle. And I think law firms are starting to be a lot better at providing flexibility. Some have childcare. The bigger firms will have a childcare option. They are giving more flexibility to understand that everybody has families. And so I think that's
how we continue this world.
Right? I think that's helping. And I think probably seeing more women in these positions.
You have a podcast of your own.
I do.
And I think that draws a lot of good light to female attorneys, how you can interpret things and, drawing other women in. And have you had success with other women attorneys being like, yes, this is good, this is helpful for me, just to hear your voice and just to hear your perspective?
We have. So there's definitely, it's a little weird. Like at the pink party last year, somebody recognized me at the check-in table and they're like, I listen to your podcast. I'm like, this is weird that you recognize me, but okay.
You're like,
I'm glad
yes,
you do.
But no.
Right? It's weird. And so it's really not just for the legal community. We're hoping, my co-host and I are hoping that we kind of spread more awareness. And it's not just a typical true crime podcast. We cover civil. Yesterday, we just recorded an episode on law school and just tips, for law students. We did a whole, probably I think something we're most proud of is we did an entire month for Women's History Month, and we had special guests. And we had amazing guests that, we thought it was a long shot, right? Asking a federal judge to come onto our podcast that just started. And we're like, we don't really have that many followers yet, but we would really love if you would come on. And
but there's that imposter syndrome,
right?
But you did it anyway.
It is, because it's scary. And they were totally willing. she came on, and it was an amazing episode.
That's incredible.
And so we had her, we had other attorneys in town really sharing. And so we're really hoping to bring on attorneys to share what they do day to day. And so people can see, what is it like?
People do not get it.
No.
I don't get it until like we became friends, and I was like, what are you still doing at the office? Like,
Yeah.
I already fell asleep once.
Right. Or people, it's, you know, you assume, and even my co-host Lauren, she's like, I assumed until I worked in a law office that you'd always be in court. Most of the days I'm sitting there reading and writing. That's most of what I do.
How do you stay focused and read?
It's a lot. It's a struggle sometimes. Particularly if you're getting cases from like the early 1900s, then it's like you have to read it and take a break and go back and read it. And
because the language is different, right?
Yes,
the English has changed.
Very. Yeah. So sometimes that's a struggle.
What advice would you give to little Lyndsie, young Lyndsie?
Oh, that's a good one.
I mean, there's a lot of different versions of young Lyndsie, but like young Lyndsie getting onto her career path.
Oh, that's a hard one. Probably learn how to pace yourself. So I've kind of always been a little bit of an overachiever and agreeing to everything. And it took me a very long time to learn how to build in break periods. And that taking care of myself first is the only way that I'm going to be able to function and get everything done.
Do you schedule them onto your calendar where you're like, this is me time, or this is me and my partner's time? Like this is...
I don't physically like write it in the calendar, but my typical practice is every weekend. No plans or very limited plans on the weekends. That is my rest time. That is the, catch up on laundry, catch up on all my TV shows, kind of recharge before the next week.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And you've got some fur babies that
I do.
They need your love and attention.
They need so much cuddles and attention, and, we have to, otherwise they create problems.
And we need the cuddles.
Exactly.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate your time, and thank you
course.
for sharing. And I know this is just round one, so
thank you for having me.
Deeper into more other stuff next time.
Okay.
Thank
Sounds
you.
like plans.